Hi! I don't know if I have ever, in one of my many videos on tabletop and pen and paper gaming, expressed this, up to and including my System Agnostic Classes series, but I despise inventory management. I absolutely hate it! Look, making characters is one of my favorite parts of the whole pen and paper gaming experience, but I have put off making characters for games for long periods of time simply because I knew that at the end I would have to do the equipment thing. I hate equipment. It is so stupid and pointless. I'm not saying, by the way, that cool weapons and armor and magical trinkets are pointless, because they're cool. They define character, at the very least visually, and might tell you a good bit about who they are as people. What I hate is having to buy matches in order to keep my oil lantern lit. And look, I fully realize that there is a group of people out there who really get their rocks off in like keeping meticulous list, tracking inventory, making sure every single individual piece of wood that they have in their backpack is jotted down, and that's a core component of how they play at their table. And to those people I say, that is fine. I also have mental illness. There is nothing to be ashamed of. The only wrong way to play is if you're not having fun. And if this brings you fun, do it. But I know a lot of people who, even if they don't maybe necessarily despise inventory management with the level that I do, they derive zero fun from it and wouldn't mind at all if it was just deleted from the game. And I am going to base this mechanic that I have developed to achieve this goal around D&D 5th edition, but really it's so simple that you could probably adapt it to any game system that you like to play. I will also post this somewhere in text form once I have fully calibrated it numbers-wise, but the idea is just so simple that it would be a sin not to share it. Also, as far as ideas go, hardly a novel one. I probably should have found this in some D&D homebrew compendium. I didn't, which, you know, I sort of found a bit disappointing. But strategy games have been doing this for a long time. Yes, I am talking about abstract resources. Basically, instead of buying specific items of equipment, you buy amounts of resources that are a category of equipment. Now, what kind of resources the players might have to manage is, of course, up to the particular game that you are running. But for the standard run-of-the-mill D&D 5th edition game where you have a party that travels across the land to do adventures, you would have three kinds of resources: food rations, magical components, adventuring supplies. And let's be honest here for a second, this is how you have handled food rations for years. You don't send your players around town in order to go pre-package a certain set of meals that is designed for the standard pseudo-medieval fantasy adventuring diet and then penalize them for having incorrectly calculated their macros. You just go to the food store, maybe even it's the tavern, very often it is, and you buy rations. These include bread, salted meat, a little bit of citrus water, chunks of cheese, maybe some oil, salt, mainly food that doesn't spoil easily, but maybe, you know, also like a little bit of berries, some butter, a little pinch of spices, some wine. And when you buy those supplies, you will very often notice that the GM doesn't actually tell you how many sausages are in that bag exactly, and also you might find that you don't really care. I'm a big advocate of quantum gaming, and this is a piece of quantum gaming that you are right now using at your table this very second. It is a category of things that is only defined specifically, if at all, the moment it comes into play. Before the moment that you have your breakfast porridge with smoked ham and some dried apricots, it is simply rations. And nobody complains about this. So why not apply this principle to other kinds of equipment also? This is also a great way of remedying player knowledge and character knowledge, because for all our complaints of metagaming, we too often forget that that is a two-way street. A professional adventurer will be keenly aware that when they are going on an adventure in the jungle, they maybe should pack some anti-venom. Now, the player, who is a Norwegian clam farmer, might know this in some abstract way. Of course, she has at some point read, oh yes, go to the jungle, you know, anti-venom. But she could be forgiven if that slipped her mind. The fjords of Norway are, after all, famous for their lack of venomous snakes and spiders. So instead of having to have the survival skills to assemble a list herself of all of the things that they might possibly need on this adventure in the jungle, she relies on her character's knowledge to buy the right things instead. And so she buys just adventuring supplies. Adventuring supplies might be anything like, let me pull up this list, rope, twine, patches, nails, bandages, matches, disinfectant, soap, cookware, torches, razor blades, bedrolls, bolts and arrows, saws, small knives, fishing rods, anti-venom, lubricant, hammers, whetstones, needles, wire, you know, that kind of stuff. Just things that are either consumables or, you know, eventually get used up when you do adventuring. Unless the situation is utterly outlandish, you can probably assume that your character, who is after all a professional adventurer, has thought of this in some capacity and has prepared for it. Or maybe that's just me assuming that player characters are generally competent at what they do. Now, of course, what is and what isn't adventuring supplies is ultimately up to the GM. That is, of course, the case. And they might even say, hey, I want medical supplies and bolts and arrows to be their own independent things, for which you might make their own resources. But otherwise, I would say whenever you are in need for a decent chunk of supplies, you use up one adventuring supplies resource. You want torches and or lamp oil to provide illumination for the entire party over the course of this one particular dungeon. Pay up one resource. You want to construct a mechanism by which to safely cross a river with your entourage and all of the things that you own. That'll be one adventuring supplies. You want to secure a band of prisoners? One adventuring supplies, please. Also, in addition to all that, the average adventuring party will use up one piece of adventuring supplies for every 3 days of overland travel. This is to account for wear and tear and the kind of stuff that you just use daily and you can't really reuse it afterwards. You know, sometimes even things that usually last you a long time, like a bedroll or like a pot, they will break and they will need to be repaired, or sometimes they can't be repaired. Now, magical components are a bit of a different beast, but maybe not as much as you might think. Personally, I find spell components to be extremely irritating to track. It is one of the reasons why I don't really like playing spellcasters. However, because they are so variable in their pricing, it's not really all that easy to go, okay, this is one magical component supply and you burn one for a spell that you do. So I would say that instead of doing one particular kind of resource, you just keep a separate money tally that you have in magical components. So instead of assembling a shopping list and then going down that next time you're in town, you just have 5 GP worth of magical components, and the rest of your money you will have in what economists call liquid assets. That would actually be kind of cool, I think, to have like a currency that's like a fluid. Someone has done this, probably. And because your character is a spellcaster who probably knows how many components of what they might need in such a situation, and you as a player may not be as on top of that as they are, you will always be fine. Now again, what counts as magical components is up to the GM. I personally would include alchemical supplies, but if you play a game where alchemy is a big separate part of the game, then you might want to keep that as a separate resource. And frankly, you could probably extrapolate this system of keeping a set amount of money in that resource to the adventuring supplies kind of thing also. So instead of buying a set amount of like tokens for adventuring supplies, let's say, you just calculate on the fly how much the thing that the players are trying to do costs, and then you take that away from the amount of money that they have invested in adventuring supplies. Personally, I probably wouldn't do it like that, but if you are fine with this level of abstraction more than with an even simpler level of abstraction, here you go. This could have a great effect on player roles because, ironically, this increased level of abstraction might actually give the players a better feeling for what they are contributing. Say, for instance, you are running a bit low on rations. Character does, after all, burn 3 rations a day in this particular homebrew system, so that might happen to you. Your ranger could go out scrounging for food in the environment, and any given environment will have a particular DC that they need to beat in order to find food there. And you know, whatever they surpass the DC by, that's the amount of rations that they can scrounge up. On a crit, the whole party eats, and maybe you even get 1 or 2 extra rations out of it. Now, to avoid people gaming the system by everyone just making a survival check and thus generating infinite amounts of food, only the amount of the highest survival check actually defines the amount of resources that were gathered. Because I don't know if you know this, but once you have picked a berry bush clean, there are no more berries on it. In urban environments, a rogue might make that check, or a different kind of check if for some reason you really have absolutely no money. Similarly, a craftsman might be able to recoup some of the stuff that they lost by building a particular kind of contraption. Different regions might have different prices for different kinds of resources. Food rations will probably be cheaper in a big agricultural hub, and an adventuring guild can probably get you some pretty good prices on adventuring supplies. You could also make up resources for immaterial things like contacts, political clout, or divine favor, which might make for some very interesting player rewards in addition to just, here's some money and the sword that is the ancestral sword of my family that for some reason I am giving to you. Although yes, gear does not cease to be a thing in this system. Weapons, armor, and magical items continue to work just the way that they have in the inventory. That's because they're actually interesting and worth tracking that way, as opposed to all the dumb clutter that just creates problems for players and GMs alike. And also, this is important, special spell components or alchemical supplies, like say you want the tears of a dying angel for some reason. You can still send people on quests for that, because probably that stuff isn't common enough to just be able to be bought at the corner store. So you can still make and play in special interesting stores and get special interesting items. It's just that shopping tours are now a thing of the past. And yes, I also hate shopping tours. They're not actually all that interesting as roleplay opportunities, given that nothing actually fucking happens in them ever. And if going to Asda is the most interesting part of your day, maybe you should consider a change of lifestyle. So I saw this opportunity to just brutally eviscerate both shopping and inventory, and I took it, and I'm pretty happy with the results. You get to keep all the cool stuff, you get to modify it to your preferred playstyle, and you get to get rid of all the boring shit. After all, what is drama but life with the dull bits cut out? That is an Alfred Hitchcock quote, in case you didn't play hundreds of hours of Civ 5. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. Maybe try this mechanic out. Or if you have ideas and as to how this could be made better, leave them in the comments. I am actually curious. And in that spirit, see you around, cunts.